So today marks an important anniversary, one that you might not even realize, but it was 10 years ago today that I first saw The Avengers. It is not hyperbole to say that this movie changed the landscape of film production as a whole, for better or for worse, and it cemented Marvel's success for the next decade. So where do we even begin? It might be the norm now to have movie crossovers and an expanded universe between multiple stories, but that never existed in the mainstream apart from maybe Alien vs. Predator. Obviously this was the plan early on. The first Iron Man teased the Avengers initiative, and it may have taken 4 years and just as many films to pay off, but eventually we saw the characters of different superhero films come together to form a team. We had solo superheroes and we had teams of heroes, but to go from one to the other was art in the making. It could have been a mess trying to get together a Norse god with a World War II vet and then add on a sci-fi B-movie monster on top of it, but you've got to admit that it works. Even the incorporation of side characters from across previous films helps to flesh it out, but the fact that they're also introducing new characters in this movie shows how truly expansive this universe is, and means that this project undoubtedly could have crumbled under its own weight. It's easy to forget how big a deal this was, but all you need to do is look at the box office. It's not like the Phase 1 movies did horribly, but the Avengers not only shattered the opening weekend record to become the first US film to ever gross over $200 million in its first 3 days, but it went on to become the third highest grossing film of all time back in 2012. It has of course been supplanted since then, but half of those are movies that spawned out of its own success. I personally remember like it was yesterday going to the midnight premiere. This was back when it was actually at midnight, none of this 7 p.m. crap, and staying up another hour after the movie just to talk about it with my friends. And then the next day, around 5 or so, a different group of friends said they were going and invited me, so I said yes, and I enjoyed it even more the second time with a crowded theater. But even seeing the movie twice in the first 24 hours wasn't enough, because I still didn't catch everything with the roaring laughter and thunderous cheers. So I went back and watched it 4 more times, one for each Avenger. Taking my parents, my siblings, going by myself, I just wanted to drink in everything they had to achieve in this film. Now, to a lot of people, the first Avengers film might not seem all that brilliant when they've already seen other things like Infinity War, Endgame, or even No Way Home. But I think that this story holds up even with the hindsight of those grander scale projects. It might seem lackluster to have only Loki as the villain for this piece, but not only is that a direct parallel to the original Avengers comic, but I think that he more than holds his own as the centerpiece. There's a reason that he overshadowed Thor in pretty much every movie. And sure, there's a faceless CGI army, but again, this was before that trope was played out. Is there any better way to display the powers of all of our heroes? Having just 1 or maybe 2 foes to gang up on wouldn't be enough. So for their first team up, this was probably the best thing that they could do. Oftentimes you'll hear that the hero is only as good as their villain, but this really is a movie almost 100% about the heroes, so it works for me. Now, as far as the team itself, it can feel slightly unbalanced, since by far the biggest share of screen time goes to Captain America and Iron Man, with the God of Thunder falling way behind, relatively speaking, for having his own movie just like them. Although to be fair, if you didn't see Thor, you would probably be pretty confused about Loki and Selvig and maybe even aliens in general. And then of course there's the fact that Bruce Banner is now being played by another actor, so arguably making it more confusing if you had seen that movie. So you've got to deal with that establishment as well. And sure, we've met these characters, but they have rarely met each other, and we get to see that happening on screen in real time, which results in some brilliant underrated moments.
Word is you can find the cube.
Is that the only word on me?
Only word I care about.
And some pretty weird ones too, like the fact that I'm pretty sure Hawkeye and Banner never say a word to each other in this film, which is especially disappointing given their great working relationship in Earth's Mightiest Heroes. And that's worth noting as well, because after this movie, there was a huge shift across all of culture basically, and not all of it was good. That phenomenal show that I just mentioned was scrapped in favor of one that more closely resembled the film, and it suffered as a result. Not only was this building film model attempted by their #1 rival in DC Comics rushing towards the Justice League, but it was even copied by franchises that have no business in expanded universes like the Universal Monster movies. Or, hey, Morbius anyone? These ranged from middling to abysmal failures because nobody had the patience and resolve to do it the right way and actually build up to the main event. And yeah, I know that Marvel has more of a guideline than a hard plan, since Joss Whedon apparently just thought throwing in Thanos at the end would be cool, rather than knowing for sure that he would be the main threat of Phase 3, but it's still more of a commitment than other attempts in the universe-building genre. This movie also spawned Marvel Studios' first TV show with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, honestly, this should have been a bigger deal than it was, because this was really the first show of its kind to actually interact with movies that were occurring in theaters, especially given how instrumental S.H.I.E.L.D. was in bringing the Marvel Universe together. They even got the beloved character Coulson to reprise his role, with the mystery being, how was he even alive? But in practice, after the Winter Soldier when S.H.I.E.L.D. was destroyed, the show drifted pretty far away from the MCU, rarely mentioning the films again. But it did last for 7 seasons, and whether they want to claim it or not, that is a direct result of this movie. And maybe you could say that Marvel's quality has become a victim of its own success because Phase 2 is generally considered a mixed bag, with the forgettable Iron Man 3, the worst MCU movie in Thor: The Dark World, the best one in The Winter Soldier, the strange but fun Guardians of the Galaxy, and then the mediocre Age of Ultron, so not quite the same average score as Phase 1. I'm not sure that Ant-Man would move the needle too much either, but at the same time, both Iron Man 3 and Ultron grossed over $1 billion, both entirely because of this first Avengers movie. Iron Man was the next film to come out after this, so its total was more than anything just spillover hype from this movie. And Ultron being a direct sequel, of course brought in audiences wanting more of this sweet team-up action. And this unique movie series has spawned many more billion-dollar hits as the years have churned along. Phase 4 is up for discussion at this point, but I feel like 20 movies later, they were bound to stray away from the original premise. But the fact that this movie was able to set a precedent tone for both quality and success for so many years is truly impressive. There are some other things, like the fact that I wish they hadn't given away so much in the marketing beforehand, almost like they didn't have faith that the film would pay off, but there's also the fact that it was one of the first superhero films where they seemed to actually care about the people. They made it clear to show the Avengers stopping to save civilians. That is almost unheard of these days when collateral damage is the status quo for these gods among men. And so many details that you really only notice when watching multiple times. Like how of course Cap selflessly shields Natasha from the explosion, but Thor just stands there taking it, his only reaction being, oh, that's bright. And the subtle writing cues all throughout, like saying war's won with soldiers, which then takes us to Captain America, and then when he departs he says you should have left it in the ocean, taking us to Iron Man underwater. It's all brilliantly put together, walking you through how this universe connects, but not holding your hand, to the point where it makes sense if you have never seen a Marvel movie before this, but also deeply rewards those who have watched all of the previous films multiple times like me. The Avengers is just one of those movies that you can put on at any time and the whole room will find it enjoyable. Whether it's from charming character introductions or humorous quip arguments or crossover superhero action, just about anyone can find something to appreciate, either just watching it in the background or paying rapt attention. So if it's been a while since you've seen this original assembling of the Avengers in favor of more expansive outings, I would suggest revisiting it and seeing how it all started, and that the world can indeed be saved by just a handful of heroes. I couldn't let this day pass without reminding everyone that the Avengers was here, and that even with its pronounced impact, it is still a thrilling individual film that is worthy of having spawned the biggest movie series of all time. How will you remember the Avengers? Let me know down in the comments, and we'll assemble together next time.